It was just another quiet night shift, until his flashlight found something it shouldn't have. Someone was sleeping in that car, and she looked like she'd been crying for hours. He didn't know who she was. He just knew nobody should be alone like this at 2 a.m. He offered her the only thing he had, a warm seat and a blanket. She hadn't been offered kindness like that in weeks. He had no idea the woman he'd just helped ran the entire company behind those glass doors.
Elijah Moore had worked the overnight security shift at Kessler Tower for almost 4 years, and in all that time, nothing had ever happened on his watch that he couldn't handle with a flashlight, a radio, and a calm voice. He liked the quiet of the night shift. It let him sleep during the day when his 6-year-old daughter Maya was at school, and be fully present for her every evening, the way he'd promised himself he would be after her mother left when Maya was barely 2. If you've ever shown someone kindness without knowing what it would come back to mean, stay with this story until the end, and if it moves you, hit like and subscribe, because what Elijah found in that parking lot changed more than just one night for both of them. Elijah wasn't always a security guard. He'd spent 6 years as a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing plant before it closed down, and after that, he'd taken whatever steady work he could find that let him structure his life around Maya's school schedule. The night shift at Kessler Tower's parking structure paid modestly, but it was reliable. And reliable was what mattered most when you were the only parent a little girl had. Every night, his mother watched Maya while he worked, and every morning without fail, he was the one who made her breakfast, walked her to school, and fell asleep the moment she was through the classroom door, only to wake in time to pick her up again. It was a Tuesday night in early March, cold enough that Elijah's breath fogged in front of him as he made his usual 2 a.m. patrol loop around the executive parking level of Kessler Tower, the headquarters of Reed Holdings, a mid-sized logistics and shipping company that leased the top 6 floors of the building. The executive lot was almost always empty by midnight. Everyone who worked those long hours drove home eventually. So when Elijah's flashlight swept across a single silver sedan still parked in the corner of the level, windows fogged from the inside, he slowed his walk without quite knowing why. He almost kept walking. People left cars overnight sometimes. Dead batteries, forgotten keys, 100 boring explanations. But something about the stillness of it, the faint outline of a person curled against the driver's seat, made him stop. He approached carefully, the way he'd been trained to, tapping gently on the glass with 2 knuckles, holding his badge up where the person inside could see it clearly. The window cracked open 3 inches. Inside, a woman in her late 30s looked back at him with red, swollen eyes, her dark blonde hair falling loose around a face that had clearly been crying for a long time before he arrived. She wore a wrinkled cream blouse that still looked expensive despite the wrinkles, and there was a folded blazer in the passenger seat beside a small overnight bag that looked hastily packed. "I'm not doing anything wrong," she said quietly, her voice hoarse. "I just needed somewhere to think." "I'm not here to move you along, ma'am," Elijah said gently. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay. It's below freezing out here." She didn't answer right away. Elijah didn't push. He'd learned a long time ago, both from raising Maya and from 4 years of night shifts, that people rarely opened up to pressure. They opened up to patience. He crouched slightly so he wasn't looming over the window, and simply waited. "My name's Vanessa," she finally said. "I don't really have anywhere else to go tonight." Elijah didn't ask why a woman in a blazer that probably cost more than his monthly rent didn't have anywhere to go. He'd seen enough in his life to know that circumstances didn't always match appearances, and that shame had a way of keeping people quiet about exactly the moments they most needed help. What he did instead was offer the only thing within his power to give. The small security booth near the elevator bank had a space heater, a coffee maker, and a spare blanket he kept for the coldest nights. He told her she was welcome to sit somewhere warmer than her car, no explanation required. Vanessa hesitated for a long moment before finally stepping out, pulling her blazer around her shoulders and following him across the empty lot to the booth. She sat quietly while he poured coffee into a paper cup and draped the blanket over her shoulders, and for the first 20 minutes, she said almost nothing at all. Elijah didn't fill the silence with questions. He simply went about his rounds nearby, checking in periodically, letting her exist in the quiet without demanding anything from her. It was nearly 3:30 a.m. when Vanessa finally spoke again, staring down into the coffee cup she was holding with both hands. "I signed the divorce papers 4 days ago," she said. "My husband, my ex-husband now, he handled our joint accounts. This morning I woke up and every card I own was declined. My assistant had already booked me into a hotel for the transition, but there was some kind of billing mix-up, and by the time I sorted it out, it was almost midnight, and I didn't want to call anyone. I didn't want anyone at the company to know things had gotten this bad this fast." She laughed, humorless and tired. "I run operations for over 400 employees, and tonight I couldn't figure out where I was going to sleep." Elijah didn't offer platitudes. He'd learned those rarely helped anyone. Instead, he told her plainly that difficult nights didn't erase everything a person had built, that circumstances changing fast didn't mean a person had failed, and that sometimes the only thing that mattered was getting through until morning, 1 hour at a time. He told her a little about Maya, about the year after her mother left when he genuinely didn't know how he was going to manage alone, about the nights he'd sat in his own car outside his mother's house because he was too proud to admit he needed somewhere to stay. Vanessa listened, and somewhere in the exchange, the exhaustion on her face softened into something closer to relief, the specific relief of being heard by someone who wasn't trying to fix her, just sit with her. By the time the sun started coming up, Vanessa had made a few calls, sorted out a temporary hotel booking through a coworker she trusted, and thanked Elijah more times than he felt was necessary for something that, to him, hadn't felt like much at all. She left her name and a polite thank you on a sticky note at the booth window before she drove off just after 6 a.m. and Elijah finished his shift, went home, made Maya breakfast, and thought about the strange, quiet night. Only briefly before life carried him forward the way it always did. He had no idea, walking Maya to school that morning, that the woman he'd sat with in a security booth ran Reed Holdings, the very company whose executives he'd been protecting from a distance for 4 years without ever once meeting one of them face to face. Vanessa found out who he was 2 days later, when she asked the building's facility management company for the name of the overnight guard on duty that Tuesday, intending simply to send a formal thank you and perhaps a gift card. What she learned instead, reading through his personnel file that HR quietly pulled for verification purposes, was a fuller picture of Elijah Moore, a single father, a former manufacturing supervisor who'd lost his job in a plant closure, 4 years of spotless performance reviews, a man who picked up every extra shift he could to save for his daughter's future without ever once complaining to a single supervisor about it. Something about the quiet dignity of that file, combined with the memory of a man who had crouched beside her car window at 2 a.m. and offered her coffee in silence instead of questions, moved Vanessa in a way she hadn't expected. She didn't send a gift card. Instead, she asked her HR director to arrange a meeting. Elijah was called into a conference room on the top floor of Kessler Tower a week later, uncertain and slightly nervous, assuming it was some kind of routine security review. Vanessa was waiting for him at the table, composed now, dressed sharply, looking entirely unlike the woman he'd found crying in a car, except for the warmth in her eyes when she saw him, which hadn't changed at all. "You didn't know who I was that night," she said, "and you helped me anyway. I want you to know that mattered more than you understand." She told him she wanted to do more than say thank you. Reed Holdings had an internal facilities and operations management track that had been sitting unfilled for months, a role that paid nearly triple his current salary and used exactly the kind of supervisory experience he'd built at the manufacturing plant before it closed. She wasn't offering it out of pity, she told him plainly. She'd already reviewed his old performance history and spoken to 2 former supervisors who vouched for his work ethic without hesitation. She was offering it because he was qualified, because the kindness he'd shown her hadn't come with strings attached, and because she'd learned, in the hardest week of her adult life, exactly what it looked like when someone helped another person expecting absolutely nothing in return. Elijah accepted the position 2 weeks later after his mother convinced him, gently but firmly, that turning down an opportunity out of pride would help exactly no one, least of all Maya. He walked into his first day at his new role nervous and a little disbelieving, and found, waiting on his new desk, a small framed photo he didn't recognize at first. A printed still from the parking garage security camera, time-stamped 2:14 a.m., showing a blurry figure crouched beside a car window in the fog. Underneath it, Vanessa had written a single line, "This is where it started. Don't ever forget what this looked like." 6 months later, Elijah stood in the lobby of Kessler Tower on a Saturday morning, Maya's small hand in his, walking her toward the building's newly opened childcare partnership program for employees, something Vanessa had pushed to establish specifically after learning how many single parents on staff had struggled the way Elijah once had. Maya looked up at the glass ceiling of the atrium, eyes wide with the particular wonder only a 6-year-old brings to tall buildings, and asked her father if this was where he worked now. "Yeah, baby," Elijah said. "This is where I work now." "Is it because you were nice to that lady in the parking lot?" Maya asked, matter-of-fact in the way only a child can be about something that changed her father's entire life. "Something like that," Elijah said, smiling. "See," Maya said, tugging his hand toward the elevator. "I told you being nice to people is a good idea." If there's a message worth carrying out of this story, it's this: kindness offered with nothing expected in return has a way of finding its way back around, often when you least expect it, and to someone who never forgot it. You don't have to know who someone is to treat them like they matter. Sometimes that's exactly the moment that changes everything.